This is a quick tip from South Auckland Wood Turners Guild. We use our chuck spanner to firm up the chuck on the lathe and indeed to take it off again. But this is a harsh bit of square steel, not so comfortable in the hand, and also it's a relatively thin piece of steel to pick up. So what we're going to do is add some wood to that and make it more comfortable to use. So the first step in that process is to take a piece of wood, mark it up where we want to cut it, and we want to cut a slot down the middle there, and so that we want that close to center. We're wood turners, we're not doing things to the thousandth of a whatever, so there's where we want to go, and we'll take that to the bandsaw and cut it out so that we can fit this in the middle and fill it with some epoxy resin. Now we can return to the lathe area and bind that up and fill it with resin. Okay, first let's just check that indeed our cut will fit the spanner nicely. That'll be good. So now we will wrap that in masking tape, because epoxy resin can escape through the tiniest of holes. We don't want that. We want to be able to fill the slot in here nicely and not have too much challenge. Alright, so we've got our wood nicely wrapped up, and we can check that our chisel will fit, and I don't think it would fall out, but I've just scuffed this up a bit on the grinder to be absolutely sure. What we need to do now is mix some epoxy resin. This is already marked, got marks there for a 4:1 mix for this Norski 4:1 brew, and that little cupful is more than enough. So we just mix our 4:1, and there's the Now we do like to be accurate, but the 4:1 resins have an amazing little bit of latitude if you don't quite get the balance right. And for this sort of mix, we're not worried about getting bubbles in it, we're not worried about the color of the resin. All we want is for it to set nice and hard. And so we need to be sure that it is thoroughly stirred. And we can see as we stir that those mixing lines disappear, and stir right to the edges of our cup to make sure that everything gets in there and mixed. Okay, so to me that now looks good. Okay, so we can pour some straight into that groove, and if we use the stick like this, it flows down the stick and into the hole. Okay, now that is probably more than enough. We're going to have a whale of a mess here in a minute, but it doesn't matter. It's more important to get the cavity there full. And so if we push that gently down, yes, it's overflowing already. So we'll just make a mess, shall we? And we want to make sure it's down the sides as well, and we want to try quite consciously to get the spanner straight in that hole. Looks like the bottom end of it might be a little bit over there, and the top end doesn't matter quite so much. So already, just to annoy us, it looks like my wiggling it there hasn't quite filled it. So we can work to just pour little bits off the end of the stirring stick into that. It's annoying when that happens. And so there we go. So we'll just set that aside now to set, and come back to it in a day or two. Let it set properly. Don't try to hurry the process. Okay, now the resin is all hardened up, we can get this back onto our lathe and turn it into a nice round handle. First of all, as with any spindle work, we need to mark the center of this end of the wood. We could have done it earlier, but we didn't, so we can do it now. And put a good awl mark in there at that center point. It makes it much easier to align the work on the lathe. Now we're going to hold the jaws of the chuck spanner in here. It's not what this chuck's designed for, so we'll turn it quite slowly, well, relatively slowly. We just need to get that centered there and bring up the tail to hold it firmly. And now we can tighten that end firmly, and now that's where our hand wheel comes in. We can spin it to make sure everything is right, and put the tool rest on and center that up so that we're ready to go. Check, check, check again. Face shield on. Lathe speed. Let's get our tool rest a bit closer now that we're getting it towards round. We want to get rid of all of that paper, and then we can decide whether we make it smaller and closer to the width of the steel. So again, check, check, check that it rotates freely, and now, a little bit more there. We can see the steel inside the resin, and it's getting pretty close to that edge. Let me just clean up and straighten that last little bit there. Okay, that's all clean. So let's now consider whether we'll just make it. We won't make it any smaller because we may start hearing our chisel going click, click, click on that there. So we'll just round off the end here, but we just want to round this off, so we use a spindle gouge. Now we stop there, we'll just sand it, and we'll look later whether we can sand that end while it's on the lathe. And we'll just, with a piece like that, we'll start sanding with 150, and I put a piece of leather behind my sandpaper. It spreads the width of my fingers a little, and it also stops the heat coming through. We don't want too much heat when we're sanding. Let's get the speed back to 300, and because that's about all we want for good sanding. Okay, so that's taken out the chisel marks. That'll make it nice to use. We could perhaps give it, I want to try and see if I can, if I take that away, am I going to just hold it there at 300 and I'm happy to finish this with some wax. Pretty simple, and the rag. We can just apply it generously, and while we've got it on the lathe, it can just spin, and look, we can see the steel inside there. That really tells the user what it is. So let's just, again, we've a wax finish on this, and this is a hard wood underneath it rather than the softer woods which we like to put a layer of good finish. Wax on this hard wood, this is Bahutakawa, will be absolutely fine. So we'll just rub it in, get the colour in the wood. There we are. I have a chuck spanner which is convenient and easy to pick up and soft on my hands to use when tightening or loosening a chuck.